Namaskar everyone. Welcome to this video. In this video, we are going to learn how to make an industry overview report. So whenever you are analyzing any industry, let's say steel industry or automobile industry or pharmaceutical industry or banking or insurance or IT or FMCG or any industry for that matter, what are the things you must look at and how you can structure the report. In this video we are going to cover about that. We are also going to discuss about what are the most trusted sources from which you can gather the data. So let's now look at the sources from where you can gather the trustworthy data. So some most commonly used sources are government websites like IBEF, India Brand Equity Foundation. This kind of websites, from this kind of websites you can gather relevant as well as reliable data. We have also websites like steel.gov.in. This is a sector specific website. From here you can gather information regarding Indian steel sector. The second one is industry association websites. So an example of any industry association website is World Steel Association. You can also refer to websites of IMF and World Bank, from where you can gather reliable macroeconomic data. Regulatory bodies. Examples of some regulatory bodies are Reserve Bank of India, US Fed, and so on. So from websites like RBI, from here you can gather micro as well as macro data regarding monetary policy, fiscal policy, etc. You can also refer to websites like US Fed. You can also refer to websites of ACC and SEBI. Reliable third-party websites like statistica.com, investing.com, etc. Investment banks report like McKinsey's report, Jefferies report, JP Morgan's report, Morgan Stanley's report, Moody's report, Goldman Sachs report, etc. So while you are analyzing any industry, it is most important that you understand what is the size of that industry, how large it is compared to the global as well as your country's GDP. So if you are suppose analyzing steel sector, in that case steel industry contributes to 0.7% of global GDP, whereas steel sector in India contributes to around 2% of India's GDP. So you must, in order to analyze any industry, you must look at the market size of that industry. And suppose, let's say Tata Steel has their steel production capacity of 35 million tons, and as you know, India in 2021 produced 118 million tons of steel. So if you just calculate what is the percentage of what is the market share for Tata Steel, it is around 30%. Next we have employment generation. Another most important data that you must include in your research report is the employment generation by that particular industry, direct and indirect employment in the world and in your country. So globally, steel sector employs around 6 lakh people directly and around 40 lakh people indirectly. So this employment generation data by that particular industry is also an important data to evaluate your industry. What is the production volume? So, first find out what is the global output of that particular sector. Then try to understand and figure out who are the top 10 producing nations of that particular product or that service. Also, please try to find out who are the top 10 producing companies in that particular industry globally. And if you are analyzing for your own country, then please find out also top 10 producers in that particular country. Sectoral consumption. So, which sector consumes your product? Like for steel sector, globally, steel is consumed mostly by infrastructure and construction sector. So globally around 60% steel is consumed by infra and construction sector, 8 to 9% automobile, 8 to 9% capital goods, like that. But globally, if you look at it, India's steel consumption, 65% of India's steel consumption is dependent upon infrastructure and construction industry. And globally, around 55 to 60% of steel consumption is dependent upon infrastructure and construction sector. In China, it is around 60%. In countries like United States, it is around 55%. In countries like Japan, their share of consumption is around 45%. So now, this particular slide is very important because you must have heard of Michel Porter's 5 forces analysis. So while you are analyzing any industry, these are the 5 main points you should be focusing on in order to understand how the competitors, how the participants of this industry actually works. So the 5 forces of defined by the 5 forces analysis framework defined by Michel Porter is as follows. These 5 forces should be analyzed individually. Threat of new entry. So how often a new player enters into the market? The power of buyers. So whoever is consuming that end product of that industry, what is the bargaining power of that buyer? Threat of substitution. Suppose you have products like Coca-Cola and Pepsi. They are really close substitutes of each other. So how easily your product may get substituted by another product is also very important to understand in order to understand how the company works, how they, in what kind of market they are competing. Supplier's power. Suppose your end product is dependent upon conversion of raw material to the finished product. Now, what is the power of your suppliers? At what price they supplies the raw materials to you? Competitive rivalry. So, is it a perfectly competitive market or monopoly market or duopoly market? And how your competitors are working in that particular industry? Are they spending more in capex? Are they spending more in research and development? You must understand that as well. So if you do this Michel Porter's 5 forces analysis, you can understand the profitability of that particular sector. Now some key components you must include in your research report. That is pricing of the products or services rendered. So let us take an example of telecom sector in India. Pricing of products or services rendered. So Jio renders us telecom service. They do not sell any product, but they are rendering this telecom service to the consumers. Now, what is their pricing power? Whenever they want, can they really hike their price or cut down their price, this is pricing power of their products or services. In India, in telecom sector, we have three main players: Reliance Jio, Bharti Airtel, and Vodafone Idea. So as you know, if Reliance Jio increases its price, its tariff from 600 to 800, and if Airtel keeps the price constant at, let's say, 600 rupees for the same services rendered, inevitably consumers will shift to Airtel. Profitability. So how is the situation? What is the situation of profitability of the companies who are competing in that industry? You must analyze that. Market structure, that is whether it is a monopoly, duopoly, or perfectly competitive market, you must find it out. So you can see that telecom sector in India, it is an oligopoly market. But if you look at, let's say, cement sector in India, so cement sector is kind of perfectly competitive market. And if any particular producer like Ultratech Cement, if they hike their price, you will see that Ambuja Cements, you will see ACC Cements, you will see Cement, they also increase their price. And if a particular company cuts down its price, so another company also cuts down its price. Why it happens is that in a perfectly competitive market, you cannot charge more than your competitors because you have identical products, and you cannot charge lesser than other competitors in the market, because if you charge lesser than the market standard, you may gain more market share, but your profitability and your total volume of profit will decrease. Procurement of raw material. So suppose you are producing steel. So how you are sourcing your raw material? Are you sourcing your raw material from your captive sources? Means, do you have your own iron ore mines? Or let's say in cement sector, do you have your own coal blocks? Do you have your own limestone sources from where you can procure your raw material? So this is captive sources. Means having your own fully owned source to procure your raw materials. Or are you dependent upon your external sources? Like you are importing coal from Australia, or you are importing iron ore from Australia. Dependence on the supplier. So if you look at Tata Steel, they procure their 100% of iron ore from their own captive sources, and they are not at all dependent upon their external sources. So the dependence on supplier is zero here. But in case of JSW Steel, they are still 50% depending upon their own captive sources for raw materials like iron ore, but they are still dependent around 50% on their suppliers. So now if the suppliers increase the price of the raw material that they are providing to JSW Steel, it may cause a threat to JSW Steel. Price trend of the raw material, it is also important. As you must have seen that in last 1.5 to 2 years post COVID, the prices of commodities has seen a high run up. If you look at gold, if you look at aluminium, if you look at any other metals like silver, copper, or even iron ore for that matter, the price has gone up significantly. As a result, what is going to be the potential impact on your customers? So suppose Tata Steel sells their crude steel to Maruti Suzuki. So what is going to be the end impact is that as Maruti Suzuki uses iron like flat steel in the production of their own car, so the price of end product is now increasing because of this increase in raw material price. And this flat steel, which is produced by Tata Steel, is a raw material or an input to Maruti Suzuki's car. So how it is going to impact your customers? How it is going to impact your own profitability? Because due to the increase or decrease in raw material prices, you must also understand what are the entry barriers in that particular industry. If you look at cement industry, it is really capital intensive business. Capital intensive business means you have to make a huge investment in your plant and machinery in order to produce steel, in order to produce cement, and as well as for maintenance and for capacity expansion, you need a huge amount of working capital present in your company in order to finance day-to-day expenses. So the first thing you must look at is how much is the initial investment required to get into the industry. Steel sector is also a really high capital intensive business. So this is why you will see that there are very few players in India who are competing in India's steel sector. We have only large 4 listed players in India. But in case of IT sector, you will see plenty of companies because it doesn't require a huge initial investment. Competition. So as you can see, in steel sector, it has only 4 to 5 large dominant players in India like Tata Steel, JSW Steel, Jindal Steel and Power and Steel Authority of India Limited. But in IT sector, you have large giants like TCS, you have giants like Infosys, Wipro, HCL Tech, Tech Mahindra, and you have also companies like RS Software, which is a really penny stock. So you can see initial investment can also determine how many competitors are going to compete in that market because it is a strict entry to barrier. It is a strict entry barrier to the newcomers. Special establishment. What kind of establishment do you need? Do you have to make huge capex, capital expenditure, or you need proprietary technology, or you must have great R&D, research and development? Now brand pool. In a particular sector, companies like, let's say, Nike, Adidas, Puma, companies like this, they have huge brand pool. If you look at India's quick service restaurant chain, there is one company called Jubilant Foodworks, who is currently running the largest Domino's pizza chain in Asia. Their brand pool is so strong that in India, if you say pizza, it is only Domino's. So what is the brand pool? Means if you just listen to that name, what is the recall value of that particular brand? Like Apple, iPhone, like OnePlus. Now, it is also important to understand in that industry how do they produce? How do they produce their goods or services? Do they manufacture it by themselves? As you must know, Hindustan Unilever, they produce their own goods as well as they go for contract manufacturing. They also allow franchisee model. They also do license and license out, like companies like Coca-Cola. They have their own trade secret. They have their own formula to produce soft drinks like Coke, but they share that formula in a codified way so that nobody can decode it. PPP model, that means public private partnership model. This is really popular in case of construction sector. Royalty based model is also available. Like for companies like Domino's Pizza. So they always have to pay one franchisee fee to the mother owner of that brand Domino's. Jubilant Food Works pays a certain percentage of total revenue to Domino's, and they are selling pizza in India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and other small countries who are neighboring India. Now, research and development. This is a very important part in your industry analysis in order to understand whether it is a sunrise industry or it is a peak time industry or it is a sunset industry. For an example, electronic vehicle is a sunrise industry. So whatever automobiles will be produced from now on, going forward in future, all the auto manufacturers are now currently focusing on electronic vehicles. So this is a sunrise industry. So if you invest in right companies at the very beginning of this industry, you can generate a lot of wealth. But sunset industry is like OMCs, that means oil marketing companies. As now we are slowly becoming more and more reliant on the alternative fuel sources, renewable energies. So companies like BPCL, IOCL, HPCL, Saudi Aramco, this kind of companies will not be able to make profit going forward in future because the dependence from petroleum products to alternate energy sources is becoming more and more effective. So, in order to cope with this situation, how they are innovating themselves. So, as Nokia, if you take the example of Nokia, when all other mobile phone manufacturing companies were either shifting towards Android and smartphones, Nokia stayed with their old school product and they could not innovate and evolve themselves. And inevitably, the company closed down. Also, there is an example of photo film industry. So, if you remember a company called Kotak, this company used to make film cameras, film rolls, etc. for photography. But when digital camera entered the market, it changed the entire scenario of this industry and they could not innovate and evolve themselves to build digital cameras, and this company went to bankruptcy. Another most important component is government's initiative. What kind of initiative the government is taking? Whether government is supporting that particular industry or they are trying to put a stop to that particular industry. For an example, for electronic vehicles in India, government is supporting it like anything. What are the schemes? You must also analyze. Is the government introducing any scheme like like PPP model, public-private partnership, and any other model for that matter? What is the taxation? Is government imposing any import duty or export duty of the products or services that you are producing, or is the government is imposing any import duty or countervailing duty on the products imported by the consumers of that country in that particular industry? That means suppose local manufacturers they import steel from China. So if Indian government imposes countervailing duty on the steels imported from China, so the price of steel which is imported from China will rise and it will benefit Indian industry. PLI schemes. So schemes like PLI means production linked incentive and many other schemes like that which government of any country keeps on introducing. This kind of schemes can give a boost to the manufacturers of that particular industry in any given nation. Other factors include ESG. Now, in ESG means environmental social governance. And nowadays, ESG factor is becoming more and more significant and dominant in investments. That means there are investors now who wants to invest in renewable energy sources because it doesn't affect the environment at large. But they won't be investing in companies like who are involved in the production of fossil fuel, tobacco companies, alcohol companies like that. So this ESG factor is really important while you are analyzing any industry, because if any industry is as per the ESG framework means its environmental impact is not negative, social impact is not negative, in that case that particular industry may draw more and more investment from the investors. So these are the just simple few points which you must consider while you will be preparing any industry research report. These are the very basic things you must remember, and also we have one framework called EIC analysis. That means first you should analyze economy at large. That means first you must understand global economy, then you must understand your domestic economy. This is economy. I stands for industry. So suppose you are analyzing, let's say, automobile sector, how the framework should be. First you must analyze the entire global economy. So now post COVID situation, if you look at this situation, now the automobile sales are down. Why the number of automobiles sold in the world is less? It is because people do not have larger amount of personal disposable income. So this is why people are not able to buy new cars. They are not able to afford as they have lost their job, or many of them have got a cut on their salary earned. So this is why you must understand what is happening in the economy during the period of COVID lockdowns. At that time, many industries were shut. So at that time, the output of any industry came down significantly. And if you looked at IIP data of any nation, it was in negative. Whether it was a mining industry or any capital good industry or any automobile or any manufacturing industry, the IIP of that particular industry was really down or even in negative. But at the same time, when the economy was shattered, IT companies and pharmaceutical companies excelled. So this is economy analysis. This is why you should first analyze what is happening in the economy. Then you must analyze what is happening in that particular industry you are working on. Suppose you are working in IT industry or pharmaceutical industry or FMCG industry. So then you must look at what is going to be the impact of this current economic situation on your particular industry, and then you must look at company specific. So what that particular company is doing in that industry. Let's say what TCS is doing, you must understand compared to HCL Tech, compared to companies like RS Software or Cognizant or any other player for that matter. So first you must analyze economy, then you should look at industry, then you should look at company specific in order to understand, in order to get a holistic view of the entire thing. So this was a small presentation from my side. I hope that you have learned and understood how you can make a report on any industry now. If you have any doubt regarding this, you can ask me on WhatsApp or you can comment down below. And if you like this video, then please give a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.